So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hello, my name is Chris and that is Mike.
Hi everyone.
And our co-host today is Ian Hawkins, head of content at Swoop and professional presenter. In fact, he's even written a book about it. So welcome, Ian.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Mike. I feel like I've got a lot of hats. But only the one head. Only the one head.
Metaphorically, just so that everyone knows that. It's good to say it for the podcast. But look, we've all had busy weeks, so let's just dive straight in. Mike, how was yours?
It's been a busy week. This week has been largely writing reports and interpreting legislation. One of those two things I really enjoy, and I'll leave you to work out which one of those two. I've also been putting together a deck today for a session I'm doing next week on the Isle of Man, a speaking gig at an innovation conference next week on the Isle of Man, which I'm looking forward to. And the real fun thing at the moment is looking forward to and loosely planning our summer holiday, which we've got coming up very soon once my kids finish their exams. So that's the exciting non-work bit.
Sounds fun. And nothing to do with the Isle of Man TT. You're not
a week late.
On the bikes. Is it a week late?
I'm a week late for it, unfortunately. But you know, one of the things I have found out is that is a government run event. So because the thing I'm going to do is with the Isle of Man government, that they get tickets and all of the local civil servants get to go and get all special treatment, VIP treatment. So it sounds amazing. So I'm hoping to build a network.
Well, there's only 100 of them there, isn't there? Surely the invite goes out to everybody on the island.
Pretty much, but I don't want to be disparaging before I
go. Sorry, that's my job, yeah. Sounds good. Summer holiday planning. Ian, how about yourself?
I've had quite a busy week, actually. I've been to Amsterdam. It's the fastest trip I've ever done to Amsterdam, in and out in one day.
No pun intended.
No, the CIO CISO Benelux Summit. Which I was moderating, and it's something I do fairly regularly. I go to the land of the giants. I'm only little. I'm normal in this country, but I'm little in the Netherlands, and running around with my microphone, getting people to ask sensible questions of the people on the stage.
Sounds brilliant.
And it was from City Airport, which is really easy for me. And so I don't like flying. I would rather take the Eurostar if I possibly could, but it's a just blissful little trip there and back.
Yeah. Wow. That was the professional side of life, right? So you were there to facilitate those conversations. How do you recover after doing something like that?
How do I recover afterwards? I don't know. Do I recover? I just keep the adrenaline going, Chris. I just keep it going and try and push on through to the rest of the week. So that was Tuesday, all the way up in the clouds, and now it's Thursday, so it's starting to wear off a little bit. But don't worry, I'll be with you all the way through to the end of the show today.
That sounds great. And we're almost at the weekend. Yes, we normally do this on a Friday and then release on a Tuesday, but this is an odd one for us. Even it's on a Thursday, so it's thrown everything up in the air. But interesting. Everyone's looks like they're doing a bit of international work at the moment. Apart from me, I am busy. Actually, I might get some of your advice here, and I'm busy prepping for our awards that are coming up in 2 weeks' time, which is a sellout in a fantastic hotel in London, and I host it for my sins.
Fabulous.
A lot of these awards tend to have sort of comedian celebrity hosts, and
which is exactly what you are, right?
I don't know which half of that I like, but I like half of it. But yeah, I need to do my speech. So yeah, maybe some tips later. But family wise, I had lovely weekend down at Muddyford, where we've got a beach house hut, and which was great. But being in such close proximity to my family, I seem to have got tonsillitis. So I was recovering from that for a few days. Hanging around young kids, I think, and all that. But busy weeks. So talking of weeks, what happened this week? So I think it's difficult for us not to talk about politics, general election. We're not going to talk about politics and general election. What we are going to talk about, though, linking to your theme, Ian, is that the communication wars have started, right? And we saw this week that we had Sunak versus, Starmer, and everyone was talking about, who won and who communicated best. And, you had a fairly nervous Starmer versus a punchy, direct Sunak. I don't really want to talk about them as individuals or the politics side of things, but what did you make of just communication styles that you saw, being someone who works in that public speaking space?
Someone who's in the business. Well, I suspect this is going to be the new. Did you know the JFK versus Nixon debate is an absolute classic of communication? So the people that listened to the debate on the radio when Kennedy was up against Nixon for the presidency in the United States, people that listened on the radio thought that Nixon won the debate. People who watched on the television thought that JFK won the debate because Nixon didn't look comfortable, but he was speaking better and had better presented arguments. I think it's going to be, we're now in a world where your social media dictates what your view of it is and the media you consume. So I was coming back from Amsterdam when the leaders of the two parties were having their debate on television. So I only really see it through social media. So if I look at all of my left wing, we want Labour to win a landslide, they will bring up all of Sunak's gaffes, and all the people that want to take Keir Starmer down a peg or two, they'll say, well, he didn't really push back on this thing, on this £2,000 business. And it's become very much, we curate our own media ecosystem around us, and we only tend to see the things that we allow ourselves to see, unless we're quite disciplined and strict with getting more people to come and have a look at it.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because I love your reference to the JFK speech, because I think there's so much sort of visual communication as well as the verbal communication, which clearly define those two people. But that seems to be still important, right? Because you're pushing that visual communication everywhere through social media. I think YouTube is the biggest search engine after Google, and they're all videos, right? So let alone the fake news that runs along with it. But getting it right, I suppose, because this is a leadership podcast, right? So getting that kind of communication style nailed is important for leadership, no matter where, right?
And who's doing quite well at the moment? The leader of the Lib Dems, Ed Davey. What's he doing? He's going off. Today he's at a barbecue with a T-shirt that says King of the Grill on it and a Union Jack oven glove. Now, he's not likely to become Prime Minister on the 5th of July. But I think a lot of people are suddenly going, oh, we really like him. He's keeping it real. Yeah. I used to be in TV production. And before the pandemic happened, everybody in TV production was saying, yeah, you've got to have great lights, you've got to have great cameras, you've got to have really high standards and really high quality. And then suddenly, everybody was used to seeing each other like this on a Zoom call as we are now. And the requirement to be tip-top quality in your visual presentation, that took a real nosedive. We wanted to see people in real life. We wanted to see how people, quote unquote, really are. We understood. Now we're making our own videos. We understood that editorial in a video is as much an attitude and opinion as the actual words that come through your mouth. Every decision you make when you edit something is a decision about what message you're trying to tell. And suddenly, everybody in the world seemed to get a little bit more literate about video and about visual storytelling almost overnight. And I think that, yeah.
And I was just going to say, no, it's absolutely fine. I was just getting excited. There's a few things going off in my head, which is often what happens. The one related to what you were just saying there. I remember when I was at school being taught how to write a letter formally. So you had to learn how to construct and write a letter. And now we just ping emails at each other, and they could just say, lol. And it doesn't matter. It's almost what you're describing is the same thing, but with video, right? It's like back then it had to have all of these production values and be done very formally. And now it's just, here's a quick snap, lol. I think the other thing that's gone off in my mind as we're talking, being conscious that because the job I've got is working for the civil service at the moment. So I have to be really careful about not going down political routes. But the point that comes up for me and illustrated by your left wing, right wing comment earlier is how much footballification has happened in terms of people's news. So you do only get the news that you want to get now, whereas it used to be you'd sit down and watch the 10 o'clock news and at least it'd be a little bit balanced. Now, if you don't want it, you don't have to have any balance. So everything's just so much more polarized.
There was a great conversation. I think there's somebody in the media. I wish I could remember their name, but they set up like 60 different, X accounts or YouTube social media accounts with different personas, different profiles. It's sort of Dorothy in Scarborough, and just tracked what news came in automatically without really any kind of data for these people. And you're absolutely right. They're getting pushed the content, a lot of money's going into the political party campaigns, right? But it's interesting that there's a point that you made there, Mike, which I'll ask Ian. It's almost like the structuring and the depth of content now, and what you say seems to, it can look professional, but actually it's a 2-second, thought, and all of a sudden it goes viral. But you're someone who's actually written a book, right? And when you sit down and you write stuff and you prepare for broadcast and you prepare for speaking, as I know, there's so much sort of preparation that goes into this. So, how should leaders be kind of prepping for speaking? Because otherwise, because there's a risk here that, people think it's easy, right?
I think people think it's easier than it's going to be because they play it in their own mind and they imagine themselves on stage being very cool and very able to deal with things. And suddenly, what happened? I was talking to a psychologist today who's he just finished a degree in psychology and neurology, and he made the point that before you go on stage, everything's happening in the front of your brain, which is where you do all your higher thinking, and you imagine yourself. Sorry, did my computer just ping? No. Oh, good, you didn't hear it. Fine. So what happens is when you go on stage is the adrenaline kicks in and it pushes all of your thinking straight to the back of your brain where you do all your sort of fight and survival stuff. And you can't think. Your brain literally cannot do the computations it needs to get you standing up, pointing in the right direction and saying your name clearly. I deal with a lot of people who find this really difficult to do. And just thinking about you, Chris, when you step on stage to do that speech at the award ceremony, there is going to be that moment where you go butterflies in your stomach, that kind of thing, shaky hands, the quivering paper that gives it away.
Don't hold a single sheet of paper.
I did a little bit of research because I know this is not all about the numbers, but some numbers are quite good. I went to see lots of people speaking, and I started counting the number of ums and ers they did, right? Because that's what everybody wants to get rid of. I want to get rid of the ums and the ers in my speech. And I didn't do it by time, but I did it by quadrants. So I split every speech into 4, and I counted the number of ums and ers in each quarter of the speech. And here's what I found. In the first quarter of the speech, ums and ers really high. In the second quarter, a little bit lower. In the third quarter, lowest of all, and in the fourth quarter, it comes up again. What does this tell us? It tells us a couple of really interesting things. First of all, if you worry that you and too much, don't worry, because you can change it. It's not constant. It changes over time. The second thing it tells us is that when you are comfortable on stage, and that third quarter is where you're most comfortable because you're into your stride, you're thinking differently, you're not panicking so much, you're thinking more in the front of your brain. And then you think, oh, my time is running out. I've got to get off this stage. How do I get off with dignity? That's when you start panicking. So when you're most relaxed, that's when you and the least.
But so why tell me, and thanks for that advice, because as soon as you said that, I wasn't prepared and I felt my palms starting to sweat. Because I can see the auditorium in front of me and I haven't written my speech yet.
And the eyes boring into you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a celebrity comedian as much as Mike may think I'm a comedian, but why do if you go on media training and stuff like that, why do they try to eradicate the ums and the ers? Because I'm not convinced actually. Someone who edits quite a lot of video and sound. But what's the professional view on that?
Ums and ers are good if they are intentional. There's lots of different ums and ers. If you ask me a question, I go, and I don't have a clue, that's a bad because it says I haven't got a clue. If you ask me a question where I know everything about the subject, but I'm trying to make it understandable, I might go, how can I put this? That's an that's quite good because it actually says, I know all about this, but I'm trying to make it understandable and comprehensible to you. There's other things you can just, if I put an in to give myself a little bit of breathing space, to give you some thinking space. If I ask you a question, what did you do today? You might have an answer to that. Especially if an audience, you don't expect them to give you an answer. The solution to it, I have found, is to warm up before you go on, to make sure you're in that relaxed space so that you're hitting, quadrant 3 when you're in quadrant 1. Make sure you're relaxed, make sure you're breathing properly, doing all the things that you should be doing before you hit the stage so that your breathing is slow, your heart rate is down, and that if you do feel your brain starting to take away with you, you stop, you pause, look back at your script, get yourself on track, and then continue in a nice, relaxed way, and that will stop you umming and erring as much.
What I love about that is that what you're not giving people, you're not giving us a recipe, right? You're not saying these are the rules. You're giving us a nice, flexible framework and tips. And I think for me, I've done a lot of standing up and talking to people. I've done a lot of facilitation, as we were talking about before we started, and I think that zone 3 is the magic place.
Mm-hmm.
But how you get there is almost like you as long as you know that you're going to get there, then it's fine, right? You get to that point when you just drop into it, following a framework. I like the practice. Get going for before you start. I like that.
Well, I used to have real trouble doing it, and I found a solution. I found a really good exercise that stops me from doing it, and that is before I go on stage. Anytime before I go on stage, I look around the room and I name some of the stuff in the room. So iPad, fan, microphone, monitor, map, blind. And then I go around the room again and I say things, I point to the same objects, but I say what they are not. So dog, penguin, Japanese architecture. And I go around the room and that frees up my creativity. And it just means that I hit the ground. I tend not to get too nervous and worked up when I'm facilitating because I know I've got a job to do. And that's part of it as well. When you know what the job you have to do is, it becomes easier to be more relaxed in it. But that also frees up my creativity as well. Sorry, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that as a tip, and I know exactly what's happening there. Like there are obviously, I'm not a neurologist, but there are different parts of the brain that you're trying to engage. And I think by it's almost like counting up to 100 and then counting back down from 100. They're different skills, and I think I can almost hear or feel actually myself calming down by doing those sorts of processes. And I think a lot of it is around engaging the brain to control your physiology. There's a sort of body and mind thing going on here. I'm conscious that this is your part-time thing, and we haven't even got on to the full-time thing. But just tell me quickly about the book that you've written and your co-author, because it's worth a shout.
I've written a couple of books. So the first one is called Insider Secrets of Public Speaking. That we're having a refresh right now. As I speak, it is being refreshed and is going to be retitled because it's our 10th anniversary, and we wanted to just have another look at what we've done and see how it's relevant post-COVID, post-Zoom meeting. So there's a lot of stuff about how to be presenting on a Zoom meeting now. And we've retitled it Insider Secrets of Professional Speakers, because Nadine de Reza and I are both professional speakers. We both worked a lot with professional speakers. We both coached a lot of speakers. My background is I used to be an agent for speakers and comedians and politicians from every political background, for the after-dinner circuit, for conference circuits. So that meant that I got to see some of the best speakers in the world, absolutely up close and personal. So I would be sitting in the wings watching Jimmy Carr or Michael McIntyre or Sarah Millican or Bob Geldof, Mikhail Gorbachev, Eliza Manning and Buller, Karen Brady. I would sit there and watch them And if, for goodness sake, if I couldn't pick up a few tips from them, then what was I doing? Fortunately, I picked up quite a lot. We put it in a book. The other books I have are...
I just got into it. That's the best series of name dropping I've ever come across. That is genius. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
I think it's on the wall somewhere.
Her Majesty the Queen once told me never to drop names.
Yes,
and the other books I have are my kind of fun books. One is called Storytelling is Your Superpower, and the other one is 3 Golden Rules of Professional Speakers. And I wanted these to be like books you'd give your kids, but that as you read them, you'd go, oh, right, I get it. This is useful for me as well. So Storytelling is Your Superpower. It talks about how important stories are. And I say stories are the software that your brain runs on. Yeah. And the stories that we tell ourselves are really important and transformational. And when you change the story, you change your world. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I used to tell myself I couldn't get through the day without a drink. Now I have changed that story and I'm no longer laboring under that delusion. 3 Golden Rules is really simple, does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
The 3 things that every fantastic speaker does. And and if you adopt these rules, you too can become a fantastic world-changing speaker.
Okay, right. And we'll insert advert right there. And the Amazon advert. So that was a perfect segue, actually, to talking about you, right? There's the whole storytelling side of things and, communicating in different ways. You're currently head of content at Swoop. And I might have to come back on the recovering alcoholic thing, but I am going to want to talk to you about the head of content stuff first. The head of content, what does that mean? Is that storytelling for the business, in effect?
Swoop is a platform which helps SMEs get the funding they need to grow. And it does it through finding borrowing. Borrowing's most of what we do across a range of products. We find grants for people, and we also find equity funding for businesses as well. And as you will know, taking something like a funding platform, which deals a lot with numbers and a lot with tax and a lot with, anything to do with finance, how you humanize that and how you make that understandable to people. Because we figure that most of our audience, most of our customers are there doing business. They're not experts in funding and finance. Why should they be?
Yeah.
That's why they started their business. And if we can explain it in simple and straightforward enough terms so that they can make informed decisions about the funding that they need and the funding that they go for, then it'll be better all round. They can grow their business, they can continue to grow, and they can continue to thrive, and they can do the bits of their business that work really well for them without getting too tied up in the tedious process of raising money.
That's really interesting, because I think I've articulated something similar before. So my background's around intellectual property rights and copyright in data. I frame it slightly more more pointedly than you. Is people don't care about that when they're doing their day job. When they're doing their day job, that's not important. So actually, what the trick is to hide your expertise in things that people understand and can pick up. You don't need to prove you're an expert. You need to prove you can help people. And I think that's what you're describing with Swoop, if I'm right.
Completely. We do lots of things around, so the RLS scheme, when that was up and running, making sure people understood how they could apply for it. Grants is such an important thing. People go around doing all kinds of interesting stuff and they don't realize that they could be getting government help with it. And so we have a grant finder which just says, no, actually, you qualify for £10,000 of funding here. Things like R&D tax credits, which is super important for businesses. For Swoop, even Swoop took advantage of R&D tax credits because we're building the platform. And it was worth something like £300,000 to us in 1 year. So it's a vast amount of money that, and the whole point is about saying to people, don't leave this money on the table. There's grants, there's tax credits, there's all kinds of other things. And that's before you borrow a penny. So before you say, I need to borrow 50 or £100,000, say, well, actually, if you get a different bank account, change your financial exchange, change your foreign exchange provider, get a grant, that you might find that you don't need to borrow quite so much money. And it's easier to come by.
I've lived in that world for quite a long time. I think what I have noticed with some of these new organizations that are coming through, these schemes have always been there, but actually what they're doing is they're making it much more visible and accessible to people. Frankly, I think there's a lot of small business finance directors and CFOs who are like, geez, I don't know whether I can go through the admin on this. I don't know whether I've got even if I delegate this, right, it's going to turn into a paper fest. So I imagine that part of, communicating how you can help is actually also automating that process, right?
Mm. Oh, well, in this country, Swoop uses open banking, so that quite often you'll find that we're automatically populating fields on things, so that it's not the paper fest. I think it's a little bit more tricky in North America, because we've just opened. We've been open in North America for a couple of years. I think they're still a little bit behind on open banking, but when that comes in, it's going to suddenly make our proposition even more sparkly and wonderful, because we can say to people, you don't have a bunch of forms to fill in, we do that for you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those really good examples of how the UK is still a really good place to do business, because we do have things like open banking. There are still help for businesses on things like R&D, and the replacement for RLS, which slips my mind for the moment, but it's something like the growth scheme. There's some growth scheme that is going to replace RLS, and it's a government-backed loan at a very favourable interest rate.
Yeah, I think it's filling a massive need in the business world, which is credit to you and people like Swoop. Just going back to your journey a bit, you've mentioned a few things actually already, but how did you get to being head of content? Because you've mentioned lots of names in an agent role. You've mentioned obviously a fairly up and down journey by the sounds of it. Just what's the sort of the short view on your journey to Swoop?
I think the short view of my journey to Swoop is that I'm a storyteller, and I've always told stories. Whether that is why you need to spend £25,000 on a headline comedian for your award ceremony, so you don't have to do it, Chris.
I'm a lot cheaper.
Don't undersell yourself too much, Chris.
A bottle of champagne and I'm there.
Oh, I can't get 20% of a bottle of champagne. Not if my recovery is going to stay on track. So why would you spend that sort of money on a speaker? There's a story behind that. I then moved into creating content for other speakers and coaching speakers and helping speakers, up their fees by becoming better speakers. And I sort of took this sideways move into business journalism, and it's been a really soft landing for me. I've traveled the world filming programs for the BBC World, CBS and Reuters about different businesses, which was really exciting because you get to go to places like Panama and Nicaragua and Morocco and Sweden. And I did a couple of editorial jobs, and I was just looking for something that was a little bit more stable, a little bit more on my lines. And Swoop came along, and they told me a great story. They said, Andrea Reynolds, who founded it, said we work with empathy and integrity, and we help small businesses get the funding they need to grow. And in the 3 years I've been at the company, it has always behaved with integrity and empathy, and it gives small businesses the funding they need to grow. And I just like, yeah, that's kind of my job done, isn't it? All I have to do is amplify that and tell it in different ways. It sounded like a kindred spirit, and then it's very easy to open that door then, isn't it? I'll give you a perfect example. I used to be full-time at Swoop, and I've knocked it down to 2 days a week. And I was initially very worried, because in the past, when I've asked employers to give me that leeway to pursue freelance opportunities, they've gone, ooh, well, we don't know. And they've made a big fuss about it. And it was the Christmas party. And I saw Andrea on the other side of the room, and she saw me and she made eye contact, and she made this beeline for me, weaving in and out of people. And then she grabbed hold of me and she said, tell me more about this work you're doing. I'm so excited. And she was more excited than I was. And she was asking me do I need any funding? No, I don't, because I'm a writer. I need a computer in my brain. That's all I really need. But she was more excited about it than I was. And it was such a nice thing to have an employer who's supportive. And I know that on the program in the past, you've had people talking about fractional employment, and it's a posh word for part-time. But that idea of being able to give enough of myself to Swoop that it is valuable to them, but also be able to go off and do other things, like hosting a conference on for CIOs and CISOs. Of course, that informs how I approach my work at Swoop, and they two feed into each other. And if I was nailed to my desk doing Swoop work all the time, I don't think I'd be as good at it as I am going out and going into the real world and seeing people.
That's so interesting, because I've been a freelancer now for five or 6 years, and I'd say exactly the same. The amount of times I'm doing one project and I can see it feeding into another project, and how the two interrelate is incredible. I think I hosted a session at the Gen CFO Summit a few weeks ago, and we were talking about ESG in the context of being a cool boss. So the environment, sustainability, governance stuff. But the thing that came out of that conversation that links to what you were just saying there, and I think it's really interesting, is that bit about it's not just about the money. So what people are now getting from work, and some people are looking for in work and cool bosses, is that understanding and trust and flexibility and that kind of alignment of principles. And that sometimes is as powerful as a big salary in terms of keeping people in jobs. I mean, it sounds like what you're describing, because if it was insisted on that you did 5 days a week and you were enjoying the freelance stuff as well, you'd probably have left by now. And both sides potentially lose them, right?
Yeah. Well, I spent a year taking my holiday to do gigs, and it was exhausting. And I get to the end of the year going, I've got all this money in my business bank account. And how would I want to spend it going on holiday? When can I go on holiday? Well, you can't, because you don't have any holiday time left. So that's when I made that decision. I said, something's going to crack, and if we're not careful, it's going to be me. But I'd rather it was my hours that took the hit. Weren't you talking fairly recently with Simon Bullmore about the gig economy, and how so many people now have side hustles that work for them? And why should you, if you've got a side hustle that pays the bills, why should you work full time for somebody else? Why not have your weekends back and your evenings back?
Yeah. It's funny that some of the people that we've spoken to, and have not just on the podcast, some things that I've done, I do find that some of the most motivated people are the ones who have got that right. And they, and also the people who are still working full time in enterprise. When I say people, I do think it is the leadership group. Yeah, it's not everybody. But they're leaning in, saying, well, how do you get to this fractional role? Or how do you get to this portfolio career? Or how do I get my first Ned job? Or how can I go to 3 days a week and still, keep relevant and stay informed? So I did definitely a movement there. I just wonder whether that is people at a particular point in their career, though, because I'm sure if you're younger, well, I don't know. What do you think? Is it a generational thing?
If you're younger, you probably, what are you going to do with your extra days? I don't know. I don't know.
Have two side hustles.
Yeah, I've got time to start another business. I'm just thinking about, when I went to school, I went to a comprehensive school, and the idea that I was going to be a writer, absolutely, I was told it's not possible. It's not possible. And the other day, I just woke up and went, hold on a minute. I've been doing the impossible for 25 years. So clearly it is possible. It's just that there's no mechanism that anybody understood about how you became successful as a writer. You write a 100,000 word book and a publisher picks it up. That's how you do it. Yeah, that's not how you become a writer these days. It's not how I became a writer either. And I even at my lowest moment, when COVID was happening, I'd lost a job and I was scratching around trying to get a couple of bits of freelance work together, and I wasn't allowed to be on furlough from the old job because of ... Even then, I was still paying the mortgage. And
Yeah.
I had a little, moment where I said to myself, do you know what? That counts as a success. Yeah. The whole world's gone into shutdown, and you're still paying the mortgage by writing, which apparently is impossible, but actually is paying enough to pay the mortgage on a flat in London. I'm going to call that quite successful, even if it is, even if I'm not going to stick my face on the front cover of a book and say you too can have all this.
Yeah, well, good for you.
Yeah,
Good
no,
for you.
I mean, that's fantastic. That just there's something in the original question that Chris asked you, which I think comes out in what you've just described there, is you got to a point where you were an expert in the stuff that you were doing, right? So you were an expert writer, so you could carry on doing that. I think to your question, Chris, around sort of younger people coming through can do this kind of fractional working once they've got an expertise that they can then levy. I think until the point that you've got the expertise, whatever that is, it's harder to have that kind of fractional work because you're still learning in inverted commas.
Well, they all need Simon Bullmore's University, don't they?
Wow.
Thank you, Simon. I'll take the £5.
I was going to say you're on commission for that one.
No, well, it's really interesting, and obviously all of those journeys are very personal. So, we're doing a very good job in generalizing here.
Yeah, I mean, just look at when I started as a writer. I was writing for BBC Comedy, so I was doing a program called The Treatment, and I wasn't being paid a huge amount of money for it, but it's the only way I could find an audience. And now, if I was 18, 19, 20, if I wanted to find an audience, I could start a podcast, and I'd know exactly who my audience were. I'd have control over it. There's a podcast called Answer Me This. Helen and Ollie, Answer Me This, and it was like something you get on Radio 4. Clearly, because Radio 4 ripped it off and called it, I can't remember.
Answer Me That.
Answer Me That. Okay, whatever the Radio 4 version was. And I don't know if they'd asked Helen and Ollie if they wanted to do it on Radio 4, if they'd just gone ahead and done it. But my answer, if I was Helen and Ollie, would have been no, because we have complete editorial control. We can say the F-bomb or the C-bomb, the category A swears. We can do what we like. We have total control, and we earn more money. If we did it on Radio 4, we'd be absolutely truncated on when we could do it. We'd be truncated editorially on what we could say, and we wouldn't earn as much money as we do. It's a different audience, but we wouldn't earn as much money. I can give you the numbers if you like.
Yeah.
If you write an episode of a sitcom for Radio 4, you get paid something like 650 quid.
Wow. That is not what I thought it would be.
No, it's nothing.
Yeah. And can you get that through, YouTube, social media, ads and all the rest of it? Yeah, definitely. And I bet you there is a sponsor out there who's prepared to pay 600 quid an episode. So
and that 650 quid is what is the upper limit. It's probably if they like you at Radio 4, they'll probably give you £1,000 an episode. But there is no upper limit when your potential audience is the whole world. If you go right, here I am, I've got 17 million listeners. Suddenly you're getting a lot more than £1,000 an episode.
That's brilliant. I'm conscious of time. There's been a great weaving conversation as always. It's at this point that we tend to bring in a question. And if you do want to ask a question, then do send your questions to podcast@generationcfo.com. Who produced this, or send something directly to Mike and I. I actually had a question in here that you've already answered. So there's a secondary question that I've literally just pulled out, which is, what bad news did you break to Her Majesty the Queen when she was alive?
Oh, no, you see, this is copyright Ian Hawkins, and there should be a thing in my contract that says I will only say this if you pay me to tell the story after dinner. But
that's okay. That's okay.
I will tell you what it was. There's a lot that built up to it. But all you need to know is that I was meeting the Queen under semi-informal circumstances. So it was not anything particularly ritzy or black tie. It was just me and a few other people and HMQ in the room. But she is the Queen. She is still the Queen, notwithstanding. And she said to me, hello, Mr. Hawkins, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. She said, what do you write? And at the time I was writing the news quiz on Radio 4. And I said, I write jokes. I write jokes for the television and radio and for comedians. And she said, I like to laugh. I like programs the whole family can enjoy. I particularly enjoy The Last of the Summer Wine. And I'd heard the gossip that morning it was being cancelled. And I said, oh, they're cancelling that, ma'am. And she looked me in the eye and she went, oh. And then blanked me and walked off.
Yes. Yeah, he just ruined the Queen's Sunday afternoon there.
Destroyed her day. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's the nub of it.
I like the way you framed it with clearly there's a lot more to it. So in my head, I'm creating a story behind it. So you were down the Lido, you were just going swimming, you were in the changing rooms, the Queen. Yeah, that's the story I'm telling myself, exactly. Which is as good as your story.
I was sitting there with my budgie smugglers and in came the Queen. I was like,
hanging out.
I was thinking, oh, what shall I say? What shall I say that I can connect with this person? Full lurid details available for those that are prepared to pay for me to do an after dinner speech. There you go.
Yes, the full unabridged version for more than 650 quid, please. So moving on to good data, bad data. Again, this is just our chance to sort of throw in a few headlines because it's not all about the numbers. Mm-hmm. So good news, good data, sorry, and good news. This is going to be the last time I talk about the Gen CFO Summit, right? Mike, you can hold me to that. This year, sorry, not forever. But I just want to say, in terms of good data, it was the best we've ever had. It was 4 days of content, 4 days of great speakers, thousands of people registered and turned out. It was incredible. So that is the headline. The other part of this is our awards is now sold out as well, which is a lovely sort of prestige event for us in Soho in London. So two very, very good bits of data for me personally, and possibly for us as a podcast. Mike doesn't even know this, but I might have a sponsor. But more on that behind the scenes. Because as you say, Ian, he needs a Radio 4 contract or a BBC deal when you've got a whole world of social media out there.
So if we have a sponsor, does that mean we can F-bomb and C-bomb? Is that how it works? Is that's what I just heard earlier?
According to a professional, I think we can. Yes.
You have to work it out. You'll have to work it out with them. It depends. Who are you going to let them call the tunes? Call the tune, or are you going to call the tune and say this is what you're sponsoring? Are you going to let the sponsor?
Oh, it's got to be that way around. It's got to be that way around. Yeah. Like you can't keep this creativity locked in. Come on.
Chris, I have to say,
look at this shirt.
Chris, I have to say that it's anybody that organises events is definitely on the side of the angels, as far as I'm concerned. A conference is great, awards are great. They don't understand the value of awards on the continent, which is a shame, but it's hugely important. And it still remains one of the most cost-effective ways of saying thank you to people. When people work hard and do brilliantly and are the top of their industry, it's one of the most cost-effective ways of saying thank you.
Yeah, and it we've talked about this in the past, but it really lingers as well. People don't realize the sort of motivational boosts that they get throughout the process of being part of an awarding. He's pointing to a bookshelf.
I'm pointing at my award shelf.
Oh, right.
We've all got our bits of perspex out.
Well, I'm yet to get an award, but maybe one day. Still hoping for the
podcast.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Just that.
We'll take
Rage our new presenter award. So, Mike, bad data, or is this good data?
No, this is bad data. So I'm almost loath to go here and end the podcast here, but I saw on LinkedIn actually the other day. So you'll remember Kat, who was a co-host on the podcast a few weeks ago now. She's back in New Zealand, and I saw a post regularly saying, "Oh, we've got a new puppy. Here's a new puppy, settling in well." And then literally a couple of days ago, bad data. The puppy had developed a limp. She took it to the vets, and it's got a disease, and it's got to be put down. So now she's got 2 weeks with a puppy, and knowing that it's only got 2 weeks of life left, which is just awful.
Wow.
So just
Wow.
wanted to.
You could have
say thoughts to her. Yeah, I know it's bad.
You two at delivering bad news. You're rubbish.
I think I was pretty good at that.
You could have set us up a bit there.
But,
well,
yeah,
it's relevant because Kat was a co-host, but you know how many dog lovers and dog walkers we get on this podcast.
I know, which is why I wanted to share the love, right?
Wow. Well, Kat, definitely thinking of you. That sounds awful, and hopefully you get through it. Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
Ian, rescue me.
I'm not sure how you could take a turn there, except just say yes. Good. That's really difficult. That's really difficult. But there's hopefully there's I'm sure there's lots of other potential pets out there that need a good home. So maybe sometimes when a dog has to go, other dogs make themselves known. The universe will always provide.
I can absolutely attest to that.
As one door closes, the other one opens. Yes, yeah. I feel like I would have loved to have just made like the Queen there and just said oh, and walked off. Let Mike finish the pod. Anyway, we're all good.
I did tell you a while back that actually in the flow of the pod, having bad data last might not be the best thing.
No, I like it. I like it because we can always, it gets people to the end, right? And people, and then you can ask people whether they really listened. Did you hear the news about Kat? But look, I'm conscious of time. So Ian, where can people contact you or get in contact with Swoop or whatever the best channels are?
Swoop is easy. It's swoopfunding.com. And that will take you to wherever is closest to you. And it's all over the world now. So that will just take you to your closest one. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Ian R. Hawkins on LinkedIn. And you'll know it's me because there's a little shouty profile in front of the word Ian. And that's how you know it's me.
I love it. And hopefully lots of books as well, shouting out as well.
Yeah, I'm always happy. I opened my own Etsy store for storytelling and 3 golden rules. And the idea is that eventually there'll be a whole bunch of these that are friendly, Mr. Man-sized books that are just content heavy, but light to read.
I like it. I might have to get in contact with you about how to write those, because Mike and I have a few ideas, don't we?
Oh, yes.
But it's not all about us, and it's not all about the numbers. So it's a lovely way to finish. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your insights, Ian. There was so much in there, and you made it personal for me. So I'm going to go and research, how to stay in the third quarter of my calmness and make sure I deliver a reasonable job on the night. And Mike will be there so he can give me some feedback, which he always does, whether I ask for it or not. But thank you very much from me. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.